Shelby is the greatest tuner of all time. Don't just take my word for it. Ask any car enthusiast to name the greatest tuner of all time, and I bet you one name will be there every single time.
My name's Carroll Shelby, and performance is my business.
If you haven't heard of the man, maybe you've heard of the machines, the gorgeous Eleanor, or the Cobra, and its coupe brother, the Daytona. How about some modern greats, like the GT350R? They all share one huge thing in common. They all wear the name of one Carroll Shelby. But who is he, and why does he deserve to be called the greatest tuner in history? Well, let's find out, because you're watching QuattroCam. My name is Alex, and this is the greatest tuner in history. The story of Carroll Shelby begins in Texas. Born in 1923 into a working-class family, Carroll knew the value of hard work. His early years were tough, born with a heart condition that kept him from enjoying many of his childhood years, something he would more than make up for further down the line. Carroll developed an interest in speed. Once he regained his health, he made sure to put it to good use, jumping on his bicycle every chance he got and heading over to the local dirt tracks to watch every race he could. He even built and raced soapbox cars with his friends just to satisfy his need for speed. He would go a step further at 15. After accompanying his father on his local postal route, the young Carroll Shelby would look after his dad's two-door Ford sedan, fueling his love for cars. Not long after finishing high school in 1942, Carroll would enlist in the Army Air Corps. Just as World War II was starting to heat up, Carroll soon earned his wings and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. It was the practice in World War II for the Air Corps to keep their best pilots in the US to train others, sort of a modern-day Top Gun, allowing them to pass down their teachings to the next generation of fighters. And although Shelby requested it, he never went into combat. In true Shelby fashion, his favourite aircraft was the B-26 bomber. Why? Well, because it was faster in a straight line than any Axis fighter during the Second World War. Carroll would muster out of the Air Corps in 1945, and in true fairy tale Americana, Carroll would marry his high school sweetheart and settle down. Well, sort of. You see, that need for speed was still around, and Carroll needed to scratch the itch. After leaving the Air Corps, Carroll started his own dump truck business, worked briefly as an oil well roughneck, and then as a poultry farmer before going bankrupt. These jobs were not what Carroll was put on this world to do, that's for sure. Carroll had a passion for racing, and he set his sights on just that. Shelby raced his friend Ed Wilkins' MGTC in January 1952 at the Grand Prairie Naval Air Station drag meet. Then, he raced Charles Brown's Cadillac Allards at Caddo Mills. At the end of 1952, Shelby won 4 races, taking home only trophies and not accepting any prize money. Who knew the Tom Cruise of the Air Corps was fast? And in 1953, Carroll would win 8 out of the 9 races that he entered. Not content, Carroll would take things up a notch in 1954, racing for none other than Aston Martin at Sebring. Car trouble stopped Carroll from winning that day, but he would return. Carroll would taste victory elsewhere, including a podium lockout at Silverstone. Carroll would also go on to drive an Austin Healey 100S and supercharged 100S. They set Class D national speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats, with Shelby setting 17 just on his own. Carroll would go on to win many more times. He was Sports Illustrated magazine's Driver of the Year in 1956 and 1957. He would crash a Maserati at Riverside International Raceway in September 1957, requiring extensive work and time away. But he would be back the next year in the same car to take the win, beating Maston Gregory and Dan Gurney. So Shelby could mix it with the sports greats, and he would get his own Le Mans triumph in 1959. Shelby's heart would again cause him issues, even with nitro tablets and elevated heart rate caused from the adrenaline of racing put Carroll at risk of heart attacks, a death sentence if it happens behind the wheel. This culminated in his retirement from racing in 1960, after what can only be described as a truly great racing career. So Shelby was a race nut, a Top Gun fighter pilot and top-tier Le Mans winning legend. But this is not the Carroll Shelby most of you will know, because the story of Carroll Shelby is only just beginning. One thing that bugged Carroll during his racing career was how unreliable these traditional sports cars were. Their engines were powerful but fragile at the same time. Carroll would lie awake dreaming of a day when he could combine the handling and looks of the European sports cars with the rugged power and dependability of a good old American V8, something you could take to your local mechanic on the way back from the grocery store. Carroll would give his vision a name, the Cobra. Now Carroll is known for his Fords, but he was actually a Chevy guy. So as you'd expect, Carroll reached out to Chevrolet. Shelby managed to charm his way into 3 stripped out Corvette C1s. Thanks to his racing connections, Carroll knew a guy by the name of Sergio Scaglietti, who knew a few things about making beautiful cars. The outcome of this partnership was the Corvette Scaglietti, the thing of dreams, except this venture would end like a nightmare. All 3 Corvette Scagliettis were built, but Chevrolet had no desire to pursue the car any further, setting back Shelby's dreams of an Italian sports car with the beating dependable heart of America. This vision, however, would become reality not long after, when he learned that a little car brand by the name of AC was struggling to find an engine for their upcoming up-and-coming British sports car, the Ace. Carroll was quick to give them a call and broker a deal to bring them reliable American V8s. Shelby would call his old friends at Chevrolet yet again, but history would repeat itself. Chevrolet would now turn down Carroll Shelby not once, but twice. Feeling his dream slip through his fingers, Carroll turned to another American powerhouse, the Ford Motor Company, who happened to be building the perfect V8 for this project. And of course, Ford was more than happy to stick it to their rivals and give Carroll what he needed. With his engine secured, Carroll would get his hands on an AC Ace shell and begin work in his shop located in Venice, California. Now, if there was one thing the British could do right in the post-war years, it was make a bloody good sports car, and the AC Ace was no exception. The lightweight and aerodynamic body would be the perfect host for the Ford V8, and once Shelby and Co had finished, the world would meet the Shelby Cobra. Carroll had realised his vision. Now, he needed it to perform. As part of his deal with Ford, Carroll had sold them the dream of not only beating their rival Chevrolet, but also dethroning Ferrari over in Europe. To do this, he needed to take part in the World Manufacturers GT Championship and a return to one of its most famous tracks, Le Mans. Now, the Cobra was great on North American circuits, but the European tracks were different, and the Cobra was off the pace. The solution? Make it more slippery. And they would do just that, with a new coupe top and flat rear end, designed by young engineer Pete Brock. Many believed it would not work, and Carroll was on the fence. But Brock stuck to his guns, and the new car would be handed to Ken Miles for testing, with Brock's job on the line. The new car would be faster than the Cobra, not by half a second, not by a whole second, but by an unbelievable 3.5 seconds a lap. The car was ready to cause an upset, and Ferrari was the target. It would be debuted at the 1964 Daytona Continental. Here, reporters would give it the name it is known by to this day, the Shelby Daytona. By the time the Daytona had arrived at the track, it could do 190 miles per hour whilst retaining its Cobra handling. It would need all of this to compete against Porsche, Alfa Romeo's Lotus, and of course, Ferrari, with a 250 GTO, and it would need to do so at the world's most famous racetrack, Le Mans, and the Daytona would deliver, finishing a whole lap ahead of the closest Ferrari and securing a class victory for Carroll and the team. And as we all know, if you win on Sunday, you sell on Monday. And Ford wanted to supercharge their already rocket-powered Mustang sales. Ford's general manager at the time, a guy called Lee Iacocca, felt the Mustang needed a more performance-orientated version, so he did what anybody would do. He called Carroll Shelby. Iacocca asked if he could make the Mustang into a sports car with a winning performance image. The result was the 1965 Shelby GT 350. The GT 350 dominated everything it came across in the mid to late 60s, joined by the even more powerful GT 500 in 1967. Shelby had made a serious mark on the domestic vehicle scene. After this success, Ford turned to Shelby to help with their racing team. Ford had tried to buy a struggling Ferrari in 1963. Negotiations took place in Italy, with Enzo meeting high-ranking Ford executives. There was one sticking point, however: control of the Ferrari racing team. This was something Enzo could not let go of, and something Ford needed the last word on. Whilst the negotiations took place, Fiat was made aware of the offer and tabled their own bid, with one special clause: Enzo could keep his racing team. Enzo would ask Ford, "If I want to race Le Mans and you don't want me to go, do we go or don't we?" The answer from Ford was no, we don't go. Incensed, Enzo would send the Ford executives home with a message: Ford is ugly, your cars are ugly, and your factory is ugly. Tell your boss, he's not Henry Ford, he's Henry Ford II. And with that, Ford and Ferrari were at war. With only a few months until the next Le Mans, Carroll and his team had little time to fix the Ford GT, but with the help of Ken Miles, Shelby would field 3 cars at the 1966 Le Mans. Having already won at Daytona and Sebring, Le Mans was the crowning jewel and a chance to stick it to Ferrari. Shelby would go on to bag a 1-2-3 photo finish, and in the process, Carroll Shelby became the only person ever to win Le Mans as a driver, a manufacturer, and a team manager. By 1968, Shelby had stepped away from working on Ford's production Shelby models, and in January 1970, Carroll Shelby would retire from the auto business. This might have been the end of Shelby's involvement in automobiles, but it did not end his involvement in business. A few years earlier, Carroll had been part of a group who founded the world's first chili cook-off championship. If it wasn't clear, Carroll really liked his chili. A few years later, he would launch his own chili mix, which would go on to be a huge success for Carroll. Carroll was settling nicely into his retirement, but soon an old friend would come calling. Lee Iacocca, the mind behind Performance Mustangs, had been tapped up by Chrysler to save the company from bankruptcy. He succeeded where many before him had failed. Wanting to put the cherry on top of this already impressive cake, Lee reached out to Carroll to see if he could turn their Dodge brand into a performance powerhouse. powerhouse. Carroll agreed and worked on the 1983 Dodge Shelby Charger and the Dodge Omni GLH, which was the fastest hatchback in the world at the time. Carroll would take a handful of these cars to Shelby Automobiles in California and tune them further, giving these small displacement engines V8 power. This partnership would culminate in the Dodge Shelby Racing Series. Shelby blazed a trail in the 80s, innovating in turbocharger technologies and many firsts, including the first V8 powered pickup truck in the form of the Shelby Dakota of the late 80s. Shelby's name would return to Ford in 2007. A new muscle car war had erupted, and Ford needed their latest S197 models to compete. The Shelby GT500 was the outcome, sporting a 5.4-litre supercharged V8, making 500 horsepower and 480 foot-pounds of torque. A twin-turbo GT500, nicknamed Code Red, would also be built, running 1,000 horsepower. This insane machine was deemed too costly to produce. If the standard GT500 was not to your liking, you could opt for the Super Sport package for just $27,995. Shipping your car to Shelby Performance and receiving back a 605 horsepower vehicle if you wanted a warranty, or 725 if you didn't. On the right surface with the right driver, the Super Snake could hit 60 in 3.5 seconds. These cars would see yet another refresh in 2010. Power was bumped up to 540 horsepower and 510 foot-pounds of torque, allowing for a low 4-second 0 to 60 and a 180 mile/hour top speed. Yet again, if you still needed to scratch that itch, Shelby would offer a Super Snake package. Base power was now 660 horsepower and 590 foot-pounds of torque. This would be the final Shelby Carroll would get to see. On the 10th of May 2012, Carroll passed away at the age of 89, but his legacy would live on and only grow larger. 2013 would see the most powerful GT500 to date, thanks to a new 5.8-litre supercharged V8, making 662 horsepower and 631 foot-pounds of torque from the factory, and a claimed top speed of 202 miles an hour. The Super Snake would also return with an 850 horsepower model, just for good measure. This brings us to the modern day. The latest GT350 and GT350R houses the Voodoo flat-plane V8, creating quite possibly the greatest V8 engine note of any modern muscle car. The GT500 would receive the Predator, a 5.2-litre supercharged V8 producing 760 horsepower and 629 foot-pounds of torque, capable of a 195 mile/hour top speed, limited to 180 in the States. And this will be the donor, once again, for a very special car. So the name and legacy of Carroll Shelby is still very much alive. A decorated and accomplished racing driver in his own right, Carroll would go on to achieve feats that nobody has been able to match up until this day, all whilst bringing high-performance cars to the masses and cementing his place as the greatest tuner in history. Some other people with history is this channel. You can go back and check out some of our previous videos to my right. You can also subscribe to the channel by clicking on the logo in the center. It's free for you and it really helps the channel grow. So why not subscribe, like this video if you've got to the end, and then check out one of our other videos.